Morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Patricia Reynolds. I am president of the Riverside Art Museum Board of Trustees, and on behalf of the board and the members who are here today, there's several trustees who woke up early and arrived to see this magnificent tour. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to introduce Melissa Richardson Banks, who is the art manager for Cheech.
Thank you for coming. Isn't this a great group here? I'm really excited about this conversation. When Valerie Found and I were talking about getting together people who love collecting, it was a great group to set up, of course, with Cheech, and Max is in town, and we're really grateful. And Armando. So I want to tell you real quick a little bit about them. So Max is a queer New York-based Chicanx journalist and acclaimed critic covering contemporary art. His writing focuses on the work of artists of color, especially Latinx, Chicanx artists, queer artists, and their intersections, as well as curators, collectors, and scholars whose work has transformed the art world. He's been at ARTnews since 2014, and my understanding, you actually now currently as senior editor, you're managing the top 200 collectors coverage, which happens every year. I think we just realized the other day that Cheech has been on the list now 9 times. Fingers crossed for a 10. So Max is also the winner of the 2023 Rapkin Prize for Visual Art Journalists and a founding member of Critical Minded, an initiative that looks to support the work of diverse intergenerational cultural critics of color. He received his undergraduate degree at NYU in journalism and art history in 2015. So I'll introduce my friend, also Armando Durón, next. He's been collecting Chicano art since 1982, building a collection of now over 700 artworks. And what I found out yesterday when we toured seeing Chicanx, the Durón family collection at the LeBand Art Gallery at Loyola Marymount University, you've been focusing primarily on Los Angeles artists. So he's really been focusing deep in the scene. And my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you very wide-ranging collection, but you do have also a deep-depth dive of photography, which has really been great. And that's actually how I've worked with him separately on other projects with Luis Garza. He also has more than 1,000 publications that document 4 decades of Chicano art in Southern California, which I was pleased to hear because I've been wanting to start the reading room here. I just donated myself 90 exhibition catalogs so we can share Chicano art. And he's like, well, hey, I got a lot. So we're talking a little drop in the bucket, but I think he's got a really amazing research collection. And among others, he has curated The Other Side of Memory, photographs of Luis C. Garza, and Time Refocused, and organized a short essay of Chicano photography at Spark in 2015. His writing has appeared in numerous exhibition catalogs, such as Camila Cruz, Portraits of Purpose, and Judges, Inmates, and Juxtapose. And his collection, as I mentioned, is currently on view until December 6th. You must see it. It's really a wonderful show and a nice selection of works. How many works are in the show? About 150. And I'm going to just do a quick introduction with Cheech, because I think you know who he is. My name's on the bill. Let me see if I can read it. I'm looking here. I think he is an actor. Actually, the funniest story is I didn't even see his films until I think it was whenever you and Chuck, the Up and Smoke, you guys got back together. And I'll never forget leaving the theater, and because I heard them laughing behind me the whole time with the show, because it was fun to see it. And I was like, wow, and I understand why all these people run up and you're a comedic genius. And he stopped and he said, you've never seen my movies? And I said, well, I just know you from the art world. And I don't know if that gave me a lot of additional street cred or in your eyes. I just knew him from art. And then I've now taken a deep dive and seen all the Cheech and Chong movies. And of course, Cheech's. So I have education on that now. But I'm really grateful he's now accumulated over 800 works of art. Sorry, I had to add that in there, Armando. I'm just teasing. But the majority of our paintings, followed by prints, mixed media works, and sculptures. And as Cheech always says, Chicano art's American art. We're really grateful. And I'm going to leave this now to you, Max, to moderate the conversation. And thank you for coming. Oh, wait, Val, did you want to talk afterwards? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming on a Sunday morning to Riverside. I know for some of you that's a trek. I want to first thank the Riverside Art Museum and the Cheech and Melissa for putting together this talk, as well as my panelists, Cheech and my father. So I'm going to get the conversation going. I think, both of you have talked about this several times over the years, but just briefly to, set some background for the conversation. I'm sure everyone would want to know how you became interested in collecting Chicano art specifically, and building a collection that now numbers in the hundreds of works. Cheech, do you want to get us started?
Sure. Is it on?
Yeah.
It is on. Collecting. I've been a collector of something all my life. As a young kid, started out with baseball cards and stamps and bottle caps and matchbook covers. I had just had this inclination towards collecting, and I found out that there was a rhythm to it. You learn how to collect very quickly over the years, and so I started collecting everything. And then I had a group of cousins. There was 4 of us, and we got together. And we were real bright kids who went to Catholic school, and we were always interested in learning other stuff that they didn't teach you in Catholic school, like dogma and stuff like that. And so the oldest cousin, Louis, who was a brilliant guy, assigned us all topics to learn about and then bring back to the group, and I got assigned art. I didn't know anything about art. All I knew is I went to a Catholic mass, and I looked at the ceiling, and there's guys in sheets walking around the clouds, and why are they barbecuing that guy over in the corner? Right away, I'm interested, And so I started going to the library every Saturday morning, and Granada Hills. Who was I talking to? It was a brand new library, and I was always the littlest kid in the class. I was always this little kid. I was, I think, 9 years old at the time. And so I'd go into the library and take out all these big-ass art books, and I just turned the pages. And the head librarian kind of noticed me after a while, and he says, what are you doing here? I said, I'm supposed to learn about art, and because I'm taking it back to my cousins. And he says, well, we can help you with that. Wow, really? Okay, so every Saturday I'd come in, they'd have a new stack of books. And we'd go through them. Okay, now these are the Impressionists. Okay, and this is Rembrandt, and so that's how I got into artists. But they imbued in me the idea that paintings must be seen in person. That's really one of the only mediums where you have to see it in person to really get the whole picture. And so they're all in museums, so you have to go to museums. So I started going to museums very early. When you go to a museum, you see 20 kids in the same color T-shirt. Well, that was me, And so I kept that up all my life. And then when I got to a position with Cheech and Chong where I was traveling all the time, I went to museums everywhere I went, So it was really, my education got, quick, fast, and long-lasting. So I was always an appreciator of art. So you get to the point where you got enough money to collect art, and that's where the fun begins, because now you're in the position where you can discover people, discover artists, and it's really good to get in on the ground floor of anything, and so that's just the Chicanos kind of, in my view, came into my view right after I started collecting Art Nouveau, because it got very expensive. I got in on the ground floor of that. And it got escalated fast, so I need a new gig here. And so I started seeing these Chicano artists, because I was married to a painter at the time, and she took me around to all the galleries in LA, because that was the big gap in my knowledge, contemporary art. I knew everything up to that. So anyways, I found the mother lode when I found these Chicano artists. I knew exactly what they were doing, I knew the foundations that they built this art, because they were all educated in college and or art schools, some of the most prestigious art schools in the country. So that began this long journey that has never stopped, The only thing that stops is the lack of money, you know? Really, I mean, sometimes I would take jobs working in movies, and they would pay me in paintings. Really, that happened a couple times, you know. So I was really, you know, didn't help my bank account much, but you know, but that's how I got into it.
Dad?
Well, I didn't grow up with art either, or I didn't grow up with art at all, essentially. That is formal art. But the way I got into collecting was an experience that I had on November 9th, 1981. And the reason why I know the date is because I have the card, the invitation to that show. A friend of mine was a friend of mine from law school. I graduated from UCLA Law School, but I'd never been to Beverly Hills, even though it's right next door, because what's a Chicano doing in Beverly Hills other than get arrested, right? Get a ticket. Forget that. So he finally convinced me to go to this art show and at the Bernard Lewin Gallery in Beverly Hills. And I was sitting there, because that gallery had chairs for their openings. And I was sitting there eating chips and salsa when this gentleman came up to the lady who was sitting next to me, and she says, well, which one do you like? And he said, well, I like that one over there. She says, how much is it? $10,500. At the time, I was a lawyer at Legal Aid. My take-home salary for the year was about $11,500. So you can imagine my face when the lady pulled out the checkbook and started writing out $10,500. This is my annual salary right here, right? I'm left with the chip in my mouth, going like this. And then I have an epiphany. My next thought is, this is how patrimony is acquired. And we as Chicanos have to acquire our own patrimony. And that began the process to buying the first piece of art, which was actually a Cicato's lithograph, which my wife and I paid on payments, the layaway plan. Some of you older people who didn't have credit cards back in the day know what that means. We finished paying that off and, you know, got the next one, and one thing led to another. But I quickly, in the same way that you realized that Art Nouveau was too expensive, the Mexican artists, because the second piece was a Tamayo mixografía, that at that point the Mexican art market also shot up in the early 80s for Sotheby's auctions and so forth. And so that was going to be, you know, way out of our price range. And so then I started thinking, well, Chicano art, right? I mean, right here locally, I've been to Chicanarte in 1975, one of the very first exhibitions of Chicano art. And so that's how that journey began. And I quickly realized that, unlike Cheech, that I couldn't travel all over the country because I didn't have the means for that. I had a family, and after that, after legal aid and so forth, I worked in a private firm, set up my own firm, but I wasn't making that kind of money to just be traveling on any given day to Chicago or San Francisco or San Antonio or somewhere else. So I decided that I had to concentrate on Chicano art of Los Angeles. And Los Angeles is big enough so that there's so many artists and so much going on, and now, of course, now even more going on, and we can talk about that in a second, that there's plenty to choose from here. And that's how that journey began. And now, 750 plus pieces later, we're having the show at the Levant Gallery, and we're well into it. It's a lifelong passion, as is yours, and we'll see where it goes.
And so you both started collecting in the 80s. Can you talk about what the art world, both the mainstream and the Chicano art world, looked like then, and how you've seen it evolve in the past 40-some years?
Yeah. How to sum this up? There was no Chicano collectors when I started collecting, or at least collecting en masse. The way they weren't acquiring, but they weren't far behind. I mean, it was a fast recognizing process for Chicano art. especially here in Los Angeles. But I was lucky in that, you said, I got to travel. And so I was traveling across the country almost every day for 10 years, you know, and that's how I could get to San Francisco and see the art scene, the Chicano art scene there, okay, and come back, and then I'd be in San Antonio the next day, and I could see this burgeoning art scene there. And I was very lucky in that I got introduced to a gallerist from San Antonio, Sonia Perez, and she was representing Chicano artists from San Antonio. And so she opened a gallery in LA, and I met her, and she brought me over to the gallery on Wilshire, really nice gallery. And I got introduced to the works of Cesar Martinez and all those guys that were there. And I thought, wow, this is the same genealogy here. These two groups are related, man. You know, one's a little more urban and one's a little more country. But they're definitely in the same family, you know, because I had cousins that lived in Texas and they were the same thing, you know. So I understood it right away, and I said, this is a lot bigger scene than anybody anticipated, you know, because and they didn't they knew of each other, but they didn't have shows together. They didn't talk that much. They just kind of heard these names and the same on the other side. So I was fascinated right away. So I started collecting their work too, and then I would come back, and then I would be taken to Corpus Christi, Texas, where there was another scene going, and oh, these guys are good, and nobody's collecting them, and the artists and especially in Corpus couldn't find a gallery, even in San Antonio, you know, they were just like, and I remember I went to this one gallery, and they had a painting by Ricardo Ruiz there, and it was like incredible painting. The night it commemorated the night that snow fell in Corpus, which didn't happen a lot, you know, and I was really taken by this painting. So, but I traveled on and I didn't buy it. But I kept thinking about it, you know, and so I think maybe a year later we had another show in Corpus. We went back there and it was still there, and so I thought, wow, I have to get it now because it's following my dreams, you know, and so I started doing that, and then started collecting all the Corpus guys. And wherever I went, I would kind of find where there was a scene, you know, and some places where there should have been a scene, there wasn't. Chicago, for instance. I mean, that's the second biggest conglomeration of Mexicans in the United States, and no gallery or no nothing to, you know, there's a lot of reasons that it happened, but we've been left out. So, but what I've noticed in the process of collecting is the scene is much wider and bigger and long-lasting than anybody anticipated. Now we're all the way up to Kansas and collecting artists from there right now. So this path of Chicano artists comes all the way through Northern California, through California into Texas and on to Kansas, and it's still going that way today. So we're watching it grow. This is a scene that's in process right now, and it describes America better than any other school that I've seen in American art. You know, the other ones become very regional, and these are regional but connected to a bunch of other regional sources there. So it's interesting to see how it comes up. But the best thing about it is all these, for the most part, all these artists went to the most prestigious art schools or university art schools. It wasn't a naive backyard hobbyist kind of a group, and you notice that right away, you know, because of the skill which they painted. So, you know, I just kept following that scene until I was no other place to put it in my house, you know, and so I started trying to get together a tour that could finally get all the paintings out of my house and out of storage and, you know, from under the bed, and it kept on going. So that's how we came to here.
Well, there was a thriving art scene by the early 80s in Chicano art, but it was very much centered on the East Side and community centers, and you could go see it at restaurants and different places, but it was very much divorced from the West Side art scene. I mean, there was very much of a divide. And for example, Los Angeles Times only covered west of the river. So this is why we had that show East of the River at the Santa Monica Museum, to show that there was something going on the East Side. And in the beginning, you could go to maybe 1 or 2 shows a month, and they got more and more and more and more. And now, I mean, I can't hardly get to everything that's going on. And I do go to a lot of art shows. At the beginning, also, very few were shown in, galleries. West, Carlos Almaraz, Frank Romero, off and on, a lot of others kind of off and on, but there was not a lot of consistency in terms of West Side representation or gallery representation. That is beginning to change just very recently. A couple of nights ago, I was at the Mark Selway Gallery on Camden in Beverly Hills, and with a Salomon Huerta show, very good show. Craig Krull in Santa Monica just also has had several Chicano artists. Luis de Jesus in the Arts District, and Charlie James, of course, with his 2 galleries, has been a big promoter of Chicano artists, especially getting them into museums, which is another part of the whole process, the whole ecosystem, is how do you get these artists into museums. And that's been a very slow process, considering that I've been watching it for 40-some years. But now it's really picking up. So I'm very, very positive about that at this point.
That's good.
And I guess, how do you see the role of collectors in this ecosystem in helping shape kind of this change that you've been witnessing?
I think collectors are kind of the ringleaders. At this point, they kind of discover something, and they have other people who are friends, and they're kind of would-be collectors or are collectors, and you point them in this direction because they come over to your house and they see the paintings on the wall. Who's that? Oh, that's Carlos Almaraz, and oh, okay. And so that process goes on with the people that and it's like Armando said, that is your name, is it?
Yeah, it is my name, yeah. Since I was born.
I can't remember. I'm at the age where I can't remember anybody's name. Everybody's, hey, dude, what's up? And no, but all of a sudden, they start to see value in it. Getting the price up was a long process. I mean, there's plenty paintings in this collection that are up on the walls right now that hung on their dealers' walls for a number of years before anybody even noticed that they were there, and so, but to pay at that time to bust out like 30 grand for a painting, a Chicano painting, was like as a leap of faith, but I was never driven by investment concerns. I didn't buy art it's going to appreciate it, and I'm going to send my kids to college on this and that. That was never a part of the process, never, because that art market goes up. It's like the stock market. It goes up and down and around, and you could be out. So if you count on that, don't count on it.
Buy lottery tickets.
Yeah, you'd be better off, But sometimes it happens, We're in the process of that rising tide right now. So it's interesting to see the blue chip galleries are now very early stages of starting to, take Chicano seriously, especially in LA, where the big part of it. But the New York museums are trying to acquire works too. I've had a lot of inquiries, and so there we are. I don't know. It's happening with the establishment of the Cheech here. It's my name. It was really a big boost because now there was a museum solely dedicated to Chicano art, and if you came from East LA or Switzerland, you could still come to this museum, and it's a draw. Like you have a Dali museum or Picasso museum where everybody comes from around the world. That's what we want to start here. We got the Olympics coming up, and there's going to be events here in Riverside, and it's a perfect time to reintroduce to the masses Chicano art, because they're going to be from all over the world, and we have to take advantage of those goings-ons, which we're very lucky to have, and so we'll see what happens. We have little buses for them to get from wherever they are to the church, and to spread the word. And you'd be surprised how many athletes are interested in art. I'm always shocked at that, because they have, and professional athletes have money, and that we're always trying to get into them. And hey, come on down to the galleries, and every time I can get a chance to bring somebody famous, or they inquire, can we come down to the museum? Absolutely, it's advertising for Chicano art, So it's a fun process to do, and other big artists are starting to come here. It's like, and captains of industry, when Bill Gates came to the Cheech one day, because his company, or his philanthropic company, was doing work in the area, and so he got one of his staff members heard about the Cheech, wanted him to come. He came here, and he was only supposed to look at 3 paintings, and then he go because he got stuff to do. And so I met him, and they couldn't get him out of the museum. At the end, so I was studying with, and I was explaining to him different things, and there was there was a painting by Benito Huerta, and it's a discussion between Picasso and Kandinsky, and it's an art discussion. Chicano's not supposed to have art discussions, and it's the Picasso part was a Chicano version of Les Damoiselles d'Avignon, a very famous painting. The other part was a lead shield, a piece of lead, a screen. And Kandinsky, well, Picasso said art is everything, and Kandinsky said art is nothing. And so the nothing is represented by a big sheet of lead, So, and I'm explaining this to Bill Gates as he's standing next to me. And he's a taller guy than you would imagine, And he's looking up, and I said, the really interesting fact about these 2 panels is that the one on the left, the Picasso one, is painted on velvet, and he did what everybody would do. He goes to touch it, and he gets about half an inch away from it, and he looks over to me, and I said, go ahead, man. You're Bill Gates, you could probably afford it, and besides, we'll have your fingerprints, And so he did. He touched it. So, we're getting into that thing. And the more, everybody kind of always comments on, well, you were a celebrity and that's how you got into these museums. Yes, it is. It is, absolutely. Because you can take Joe Blow with the exact same collection that I have, and he would have a harder time getting into museums without, coming out of academia, but everybody in the museum world has the same concerns as everybody in show business. They want to fill those seats with asses. They want people to come to their museum. So anything that can give them a leg up, they're all for it. It wouldn't have succeeded if the art wasn't good. That's the bottom line of that. It wouldn't have succeeded. But it is succeeding because the art is good, and it was good before it got discovered. A lot of art movements get better as they get discovered. The Chicano art painters were good before they got discovered. So that was a great big buildup for us.
Well, collectors are part of an ecosystem that includes galleries and museums, and of course the artists. And we often are one of the things that we're proud of, and I know Cheech is in the same position, so we've discussed this before, where you happen to be there at the beginning, when some young person, or maybe an older person who's never shown anything, happens to show you their work, and you realize that you're looking at something special. And when you acquire that piece, and you hold on to it and so forth, it's now, at some point, because you're not going to live forever and you're not going to take it with you, it's time to decide what's going to happen to it. And the best place, in my view, is, if it's good enough and you find the right place, is a museum. And that's the next step. But of course, because museums, unfortunately, because of limited funds and other reasons, they're not going out looking for the young artist to be the first one on the block to buy it. They're waiting for a certain level of validation about the value of the art. And so that's what collectors can provide by supporting the artist. Oftentimes when we've been the first ones to buy something from somebody, we've actually encouraged their career. They were convinced after that first first sale that, oh, maybe I can be an artist. Maybe I am an artist. Maybe I should go get my MFA. As Connie Mendoza, who's in our show, decided after I bought her piece, okay, I'm gonna go get my MFA. Well, she just got her MFA this last June. Yolanda Gonzalez, who you know well, also said, when Armando bought that piece, I knew I was an artist. And so you're validating them. 30 years later, they're still an artist and they're still successful. But that's the role of collectors to begin that process. You can also be a collector and help a museum acquire a piece, for example. Okay, you can be part of a group that buys a piece if it's very expensive, or you can, be the one that actually pays for the piece for the museum. We did that for LACMA when they had phantom sightings. They wanted to buy a photograph, which was the main kind of the signage for the show of phantom sightings, which was in 2007 or so. So somebody called me, and we bought the photograph to donate to LACMA. Fast forward like 7 or 8 years, and we're at the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C., seeing a group show, and there and behold is, the photograph with Durón Family Collection, donated by Durón Family Collection. I go, oh my God, that was us. That's the piece. That's us. We discovered it like that, right? And obviously, it was a very gratifying moment. But so you can. There are things that collectors can do, to help museums along. By thinking about where's the best place to donate, and then getting involved in the process, because it's not just, I have 200 pieces of art I'd like to, dump on your museum. There's a process for a session of, the evaluation and so forth. And sometimes museums can't handle what you want to offer them. They'd like to, but some of them can't. Or it's not really what they collect, what they're really focused on. So you have to kind of choose wisely. But certainly with this museum, they're a young museum. I'm sure there are a lot of holes that can be filled in terms of the collection, and so there's a lot of room for that. And I don't know exactly what the accession process here is, but there's a lot of ways to donate and to be part of a bigger thing than any of us are.
And so how have each of you gone in approaching to building the collection? When you see a work, how do you know you want to acquire it? Do you think about how it fits in with everything else that's already in the collection?
Sometimes that's a factor, but I have this other process that I use. I have to, a painting, for me to really acquire it, it has to haunt my dreams. Really, I swear to God, if I keep thinking about it and it appears in my dreams, it's like, I'm supposed to get this. If it happens enough times, and I go back after a year or 2 years, and the painting is still at the gallery, and I thought it was a great painting in the beginning, well, get off your ass and get it. That's how that process goes. I've always been very intuitive about what I acquire, and it has to kind of strike me like that. And then once that gate is open, then I usually start acquiring that artist's works in depth, because they got a lot to show. Basically, they have drawings and paintings and lithographs and seriographs and whatever and different subjects that they go into. So if you recognize that kind of quality in an artist, you kind of, okay, let's see where this goes, And for me, it was easier because I could develop a personal relationship with most of the artists in the collection. I call them, I visit them, I check in on them every once in a while, make sure everything was good. A lot of them live here in LA, so it was easier. But I kept that correspondence with them going all the time, still to this day. When I discover a new artist, or even the old artists, they keep sending me work all the time, I'm into the process. I see it early before they have done any coloring to it, or so sometimes it's as a drawing, but you recognize their ability or where they're going based upon what you already have in your collection. And so that's kind of what there's no greater joy for me than standing in front of a brand new painting by a brand new artist that I've never heard of and go, wow, that's good, yeah. And it's kind of that, but that wow is informed by a lot of previous knowledge that you put into to recognize that it's good, so that's how that goes right now.
Well, very much in the same vein, for me, it's an intuitive process. What I do is I'll go to a gallery and I try not to look at the titles because I'm looking at the work. I'm looking at what the work is telling me. And I'll go around, and if there's a piece that stays right here in my head, my mind, that's the piece. And I look at a lot of art. I go to a lot of art shows, all over this town. People that know me here, they see me everywhere in LA. But that's the piece that I want. And I respond, if I can afford it, then I buy very quickly. A month ago, I was at Chimaya Gallery for their opening, and there were a lot of people there, and I said, that's the piece, I want to buy that piece. They hadn't even gone back downstairs and back upstairs to put the little red tag on it that 2 other people said they wanted that piece. And the gallery owner told me, Steve Acevedo says, I could have sold that piece 5 times over just that afternoon. Because, it was a brand new artist, but it was it's a very simple piece. I wish I could show it like we had, because it does, it's not a showy piece in a way, but it said so much that everybody wanted it, But I knew if I wanted, I had to say right there because it wasn't going to be here next year, And so, but it's very intuitive, and you just kind of know. But it's a process. I mean, that's how it works now. Over time, because you have to go. I think you have to go to look at a lot of art. You have to go look at bad art. Okay, you got to go look at art that you don't think you're gonna like, because sometimes you'll find out. I did like that. I did like that show, or I did like that artist, even if you thought you weren't gonna like it. And then sometimes when you go to somebody you think you're gonna love, and you go, oh, this was not good. Why did I could have done something else on my Saturday afternoon. But so it goes. But you learn. Your eye gets educated. The more you see, your eye gets more and more educated, so it becomes more and more intuitive. The process becomes very quick in terms of what you like and what's not for you.
It's just like any category that you want to be an expert at, and then the adage is that in order to become an expert in that, you have to see 10,000 images, or you have to take 10,000 swings with a bat, and it requires that 10,000. When you hit that, you have enough the basis for determination of what is good and what is bad. At least you know what's really bad and you know what's really good, So, but it requires that work, and you have to love to do that work. Really, I mean, that's the joy in it, and it's to find out more and more, and you see you see roots more than anything. Oh, I see where that painting came from, that where he was influenced or she was influenced by. But it's a fun work, There's fewer things that give me more joy in my life than that process,
Is there a recent acquisition that was hunting your dreams, Cheech, that you just got?
I'm trying to think. Let me think about it. Let me get back to you on that one.
Sure.
Yeah. There's this painter, Ricardo Luis, and he's from San Antonio, Corpus Christi, and I got into here's the painting I was telling you about before, and so I finally met him after I bought this painting. I went back to Corpus, and he looks like the guy that should be doing your taxes, He was a flamboyant artist. As a matter of fact, he ran a medical supply house for a number of years. He was the general manager of it, and he could only afford to paint, or had time to paint when he got home from work, and gave a little time to his kids and his wife, and then he'd maybe go up for an hour to his painting space. So it took him a long time. So when he finally got to the point where he could retire from being the general manager of a medical supply house, then he could really get that. And so he's pumping out the work right now, you know. So I just bought a piece from him, and I'm at the point with him where I could do it over the phone, you know, where it's just, oh, send me the image. Okay, I know what that's going to look like when it gets all filled in, you know. And I just acquired a piece from him that every once in a while his paintings have the figure of Bob's Big Boy, you know, from the Bob's Big Boy hamburger. And I asked him about that. Why is Bob's Big Boy always in your paintings? And so he says, because it symbolizes for me abundance, the abundance of America. A guy with a big hamburger, and he's nice, and he's round, and he's well fed, and like, but he'll put it in the middle of a bunch of other stuff. They're like, oh, okay, you know. And so I got to that point, and that's the one that was haunting my dreams. He showed it to me over the phone, and he hadn't finished it yet, so there was a lot of parts still left to be done. But I started, you know, dreaming about what it was going to look like at night. And so finally, when I got it, and they always look better when you see them in person. Always, you know, like if you recognize that at the beginning, like, whoa, this is, well, I'm going to put that up right now, you know. So yeah, that's the joy in it for me. I'm sure it's part of it.
I'll tell a story about one that haunted me for 2 years. It was a Salomon Huerta Cabeza, any of you who know his Cabeza series. And I asked him, he was in a show, and I said, can I buy one of these pieces? He says, no, because I'm putting a whole series together for a gallery show that I'm hoping to have, you know, have a gallery pick me up and so forth. And so I really love this one Cabeza. And he, 2 years later, he had a show at Patricia Reynolds, his first show at Patricia Reynolds Gallery in Santa Monica, Bergmont Station. And I went there before the show opened, because I couldn't go to the opening that Friday, that's in the evening. So I went in the middle of the afternoon, went to the opening, and the show was almost all sold out. There were only 2 pieces that had not sold. And for an opening to be totally sold out, you know, it's a big thing. And there were like 30 cabezas. I mean, there were a lot of they all but 2 had sold. The gallery owner, of course, everybody was really happy about that. But one of the 2 that had not sold was the one that I wanted. The one that spoke to me, which you would see at the Durón exhibition at Le Monde if you go, is the one with this guy with the back of his head was kind of got like grooves, okay? Everybody else's head was real nicely polished, but his had grooves, and it was so different. That's the one I wanted. For whatever reason, 29 people didn't like that one, didn't choose that one, but that was the one for me. It was the one that was different. It was the one that spoke to me beyond the rest, because the Cabeza series is about wondering who that person is on the other side of that skull, I mean, the back of the head, right? Who is that person? Well, this guy with the crinkly, you know, back of the head was the one that I wanted to really know who that guy was, right? It seemed to me that took the issue to the edge. And so that was the one that I wanted. That was the one that was different. And there it was, and luckily I got it.
There's a point at which you put in all the work like that, and you've seen your 10,000 images, which you have to trust your instinct. And that's a really important point in any collector's life, where you trust your instinct. You don't second guess your instinct. And I was taught a very big lesson by that. There was the painting I was talking about, where there was Picasso and Kandinsky. I was at a show in Houston. I was doing a show there, and we got taken to this art show. It was a big room, and there was a lot of people there. And that's the first painting that I saw when I walked into the place. I go, wow, this is good. Yeah, I'm definitely interested in getting this. I said, but I want to take a walk around the thing to see whatever. But by the time I got back, it had sold. And what? You know, you're not supposed to do that. I said I liked it. You know, what is wrong with you? And so I was like, okay. One day, I get a call out of the blue, and it was the guy who bought it. He was a lawyer in Corpus Christi, and he had passed on. And his son knew that I liked that painting, and so would you like to acquire it? I said, you damn right, I would like to acquire it, because I've learned my lesson. But it's trusting your instinct at that point. And if you have the money and you're going to lay it out anyways, lay it down now. And I can't tell you. After that, I never lost a painting in that process. I trusted my instinct. And you don't want to get to the point where you're very you're full of yourself and your instinct, but you've put in the work, and you know what good painting is and what good painting is not. So.
All right, I think we have time for one more question before we open it to the audience. So I know this is a question my dad wanted to hear from you and to also answer. What do you think the future of Chicano art is?
It's going to get bigger and bigger as the country realizes that this is American art, and it is not something, you don't have to be a Chicano to appreciate it. I'm not French, but I love the Impressionists. And we're getting to that point now, because the more and more they see it, the more and more they get used to seeing it. And they started, then the understanding begins at that point. Oh, I understand this art. And I see this artist is consistent from painting to painting. And we're in the process right now where the blue chip galleries are starting to pick up young Chicano artists. And that's the difference, because painters and their oeuvre have a certain period, some artists can really extend it, till the day they die, which is, not good. I mean, not good that they die, but and some artists have a brief period where they're incandescent, so you have to learn how to judge those things.
Well, I also think that the future is bright. As I said earlier, you're seeing West Side galleries and picking up Chicano artists as their artists, but it's not going to happen if people don't participate. Collectors aren't buying them. But I do see it as very bright. I also see another development which I think is important, and that's Mexico beginning to recognize Chicano artists, and including Chicano artists in shows. There's going to be a big show in April at Bellas Artes in Mexico City. That's called Aslan el Túnel del Tiempo, the Tunnel of Time. It's about Chicano art at Bellas Artes, which is like the Louvre in for Mexico City. So that's a recognition of Chicano art at the highest level. And I've been, working with other people to promote this in Mexico. But now it's happening at the very top. And so I'm very, very positive, about what's happening with Chicano art and what's going to happen, and hope to see much more recognition of some of the artists, people like Margaret Garcia sitting right there in front of me, who's in this collection and in our collection, of course, but certainly deserves a lot more attention than she's ever received. So with that.
I think we have time for 2 questions, maybe.
You shut out.
I'm giving it a second. Okay. Before we open to those 2 questions, I forgot to ask if you could, Armando, talk about the Chicano Art Collectors Anonymous, CACA, from the 1980s.
Yeah. Briefly, in the late 80s, a few people we would keep seeing each other at shows, like, weren't you there last weekend? Didn't I see you last weekend at this show at South Up Graphics? Or didn't I see you just an hour ago at this show, Oranges, Sardines, or something like that, And so we kind of start, talking to each other and finding out that it was all this little group of Chicano collectors who were just kind of milling around each other. And we decided, we had to form a group or something, and we started going to each other's homes. So on a Sunday afternoon, and we'd all get together and go to different homes and see what people were collecting. And so we decided we'd put together a group, but we didn't want to be formal. We didn't want, the joys in the collecting and showing and all that is sharing. It wasn't going to be in having meetings and all of that. So in order to keep it, loose, we decided to call ourselves CACA. That's Chicano Art Collectors Anonymous. Okay?
That'll keep it loose, yeah.
You know, but right, keep you loose, you know, just, you know. And so that's how, that's what we did. That's where CACA comes from, yeah.
Anyone have any questions? There's mics too.
Thank you for a lovely conversation. My question is, given, a lot of the Chicano art that we see has political connotations, some subdued, some very obvious. In the current political environment, have you seen indications of self-censorship, either by the galleries or by the artists themselves, or an increased desire for self-assertion?
I haven't noticed it yet, but there's this phenomenon that occurs in every generation of new painters that come into the field, which I've noticed, is that they always bring news from the front. That's what I always call it, news from the, this is what's happening in my neighborhood right now. This is what my neighborhood looks like. These are the people in my neighborhood. And so, and they give a report. And then they go on to other concerns. You know, they don't generally stay 100% political right now. And they want to go in their own private artistic concerns. And I understand that, and I was kind of worried about it at the beginning when that process started happening. But then the next generation comes in and they give their news from the front, which is different from the old news from the front. And they keep interpreting that in that way, and it's continuing to happen. And so far, I want to incorporate that in what we do here at the Cheech, you know, because I want there to be a film collection, a part of the museum that's devoted to film, and we're thinking about a couple of projects that I think we'll start it up, and it'll be called News from the Front.
Well, we know that there's been censorship at the top via the Smithsonian and the cancellation of an exhibition already, but I don't see it elsewhere. Certainly the Monuments Show at MoCA. You know, if you haven't seen it, please go see it if you're in LA, because it's a great exhibition. But I think the artists are, as Cheech just said, you know, they're the first to react. And the piece that I was referring to that I bought a month ago, it's exactly that. It goes to that issue, but it does in a very subtle way. And that's what I think was important about the piece that I have. It's a guy with a grass blower, like a gardener, okay? But he's got this pre-Columbian face on him, and it's very well done. So it's not like really obvious in a way, you know? And I think it's, but you know, political art certainly keeps you know, being made. But I think it's a mistake to think that Chicano art has to be political, okay? That it has to be iconic, that it has to be representational, that it has to be colorful, okay? I think it's a mistake to do that. It's been something that's been going on for many years in the institutions and so forth, but we have to get away from that, I think, and understand that Chicano art can be made in 100 different ways, and it has to be, doesn't have to be any of those things. It can get bust out of those four you know, walls.
Margaret?
Mic coming.
Usually I speak pretty loud. For me, culture is the way in which we define who we are as a community. And, you know, nature hates a void. If you don't fill that void, if you don't define who we are, if we don't define who we are as a community, then that leaves the media and the politicians the freedom and the space to define us according to their fears and how they see us, and that's when we become rapists and drug addicts. And
Is that how you do it?
that's how it's doing. So the only way to control the narrative is to make sure that the representation of culture from the artists, from the community, the food, the art, the movies, and all the other things are defined from within the community instead of from without, which brings me a little bit to the position of Max, because, you know, a lot of the newspapers whether it back in the day was Herald and the LA Times, you know, they'd send out an art critic who had no taste for Chicano art or African American art or any other kind of art of color. And it was sort of like sending a food critic to a restaurant, a Mexican restaurant who didn't like Mexican food, and then expecting a good critique out of it. Whereas I didn't feel that they had the bandwidth to be criticizing it or to be looking at it because they weren't from the community. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? I think we have time for one more, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you for, to the Cheech and the staff for a wonderful day. The tour earlier was tremendous. Thank you for hosting, this discussion. Both of you are, are lightning rods, as patrons of Chicano art. You're lightning rods. And then to me, it occurs that the repetitions that, are so important at the galleries and here at the museums, that those are the platforms, and you're shining the light on it, and political statements or not, the statement is that there's value in the perspective of the Chicano artist, and to have this establishment here in my hometown means the world to me. It gives such an example, of cultural pride, the things that you have already accomplished, the way that we've been able to to partner and bring students to this very room. We brought as a part of Dia de los Lobos, we brought students here to talk with Luis Perez from Los Lobos about album art. But it's because you have this space that you are that you're sharing, and you've accomplished so much already. Cheech, may I ask, what is some of the vision, for the coming years? You've already done so much in such a short period of time, publicly. What's the vision for the next steps?
Well, we're going to keep our eye on. We're in a lucky position right now, and that artists come to us. They want to be in the Cheech, and other museums want to do stuff in conjunction with the Cheech. It was there again in the establishment of this association. It was trusting your instinct at right at the beginning. So I did a show here at the Riverside Art Museum. I think it was Works on Paper, and it was the biggest show, attendance-wise, that they ever had. And the town manager, John Russo, had a bright idea, because they had to repurpose the building. It was the town library, as all the locals know. And they were building a new Jetsons library down the street, where everybody international is building the same exact library with the swirling lights and neon and everything. And they had to reposition this, repurpose this building or destroy it. And that was the other alternative. And John got the bright idea that it was offered to me for the collection. And it took me a while to realize what they were talking about. Like, well, you want me to buy you a museum? Well, I'm doing okay. I don't know if I'm museum rich, So no. We want to give you the museum for the collection. I didn't know what that meant for the collection. In their mind, is you give us the collection, and we will provide you with a museum and support it for at least 20 years. That was the deal. And I did. You want me to give you the collection as it's in yours now, and that's not mine anymore? Yes, that's what we want. Who? I'll have to think about that one, and I was looking for a sign that I should do it. I knew it was the right thing to do, because this offer had never been made to anybody, as far as I knew, that they were offered a museum that would house only their collection. And for a section of art that was looking for exactly that, because they never had that before. But still, I mean, it was a collection that I'd put together for 50 years, you know, and so I'm looking for a sign. I'm a big believer in signs. I guess being Catholic or something. And I was walking through the building, and I asked the person I was walking through, how big is this building? Because it's a pretty big building. She goes, it's a 66,420 square feet. And I said, well, that's great. 420? That's the sign. Thank you, Lord. Okay, we're going to jump off this cliff together. Hold my hand. Let's go, you know. And that's what it was. And it's, you know, that is when your intuition pays off and you have to listen to it.
Well, if I could just add something, because I think it's really important. You know, there's been studies about how art can transform communities. This museum has transformed this community, culturally, politically, economically. Okay, and it's important to acknowledge that this is a driving force for the transformation of this whole area. I know from coming here as a lawyer to the courthouse and seeing a kind of an empty area here, okay? But this museum has really transformed this entire area and begun to transform. It's going to shoot out from here and get bigger and bigger. But this is the hub, and this is the place to support.
And it's a model for anybody else who wants to do the same thing in their community, their state, or their part of the country. And they'll, you know, because there's no limit to how many other kinds of museums there are, you know, for automobiles or whatever. So they see it can work, and it was approved by these. They were really looking to see what financial impact we're going to make here, and because it was the test of a private-public partnership, and so the city commissioned a report to find out exactly what. It wasn't commissioned by me; it was commissioned by the city, and they came back with a report that in the first 2 years the Cheech had caused $28 million to be into the community in the first 2 years. And so need I say more? And it's because of people coming too. That people are going to come, and I really wanted to make this an international destination. And I think it is becoming that right now as we speak. We'll know a lot more after the Olympics.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. By the way, John Russo happens to be in the room this morning.
Where are you?
And more importantly, his wife, Melissa, probably the one who really had the idea. But we'll give John credit. Yes. Yes, and Chris MacArthur's father was Cheech's dentist, right?
My father was, when I met Cheech for the first time, which was in 2017, I went up to him and I said, my father was your dentist. Oh, Dr. MacArthur. And he said, not only was he my dentist, he was my parents and my grandparents' dentist.
So yeah, it's a small world. But thank you all for coming today. Thank you, Armando and Cheech and Max, not only for being here today, but for your 40 years of commitment to archiving and preserving this work and bringing it into the community, for making the Cheech possible. It's amazing accomplishment, the archives that have been kept. It's just wonderful that there are people who had the appreciation and the foresight to collect this work and now make it available to the public. So thank you so much for that. I had the privilege of seeing the Armando collection yesterday at LMU. You need to make the drive to LA, even if it's pouring rain. It's well worth the visit. I'm going to try and get back again before it closes. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for all of you. Everyone in this room, or most of the people in this room, many of the people have contributed a piece of art to our collection here, or have made a gift towards the purchase of a piece of art, or have given hundreds of pieces of art, perhaps. But anyway, we appreciate that so much. We really are looking at what the future of the Cheech is, and can we be the national repository for Chicano art, so that when shows are looking to put on, when other museums are looking to put on shows, they're coming to us for the loans. So we very much appreciate your support for our acquisitions and collections. We'll have an exciting announcement on December 2nd. The Miami Arts, Fountainhead Arts in Miami is going to be acquiring a piece. They actually purchased a piece from an artist and will be donating it to the museum. So we are gaining that reputation. It's thanks to all of you for all the work that you have done. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you Armando for the great pitch you made to encourage people to give as well. Thank you.
No, Marymount. Loyola Marymount over in Westchester.
Westchester,
The
okay.
Loyola
Do you-
Marymount